Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Pragmatic Anarchist podcast, the title of which was coined when I appeared with you guys over on your show, Dissidence. Russell and Keaton, we had a lot of fun talking on there. How are you guys doing this morning?
Pretty good.
Doing all right. Great to talk to you again, as always.
It is brutally cold in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
And I assume upstate where Keaton is.
Yeah, wind chill's about -10 up here.
It's 12 degrees right now in New York City.
I'm a little
without
chilly.
The wind chill, just straight up 12 degrees.
I'm a little chilly. It's around 60. I've got my long sleeve on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you bastard.
One of the benefits of living in Florida.
Yeah.
There's a few. I like the sunshine and the beaches.
My piano teacher just absconded to Florida.
It's a popular destination, especially nowadays with coronavirus restrictions being rampant everywhere, but our governor just being gung-ho about killing all of the old people in our state. So we're open for business.
Yeah.
And
lightens up the Medicare rolls.
Yep, it's a thing. We got to make room for the next batch of retirees.
Yeah.
They're not gonna kill themselves. But
you have to rotate them out.
Some do.
Yeah, oh man. So
it's like a really popular restaurant. You can't sit at the table for 3 hours, right?
Right.
The restaurant's really popular. An hour, they turn you over so the next group can come in. That's like Florida with seniors.
Exactly.
Yeah. They can't just live to be 90, 95. They, run out of room. Come on, people waiting to get in.
We've been filling up fast. And that brings us to one of the topics that has been on everybody's minds the past couple months. We touched on it, right? When it comes to the work situation in Florida and everywhere, like my experiment, right? I did that here. People around the country were talking about how, well, you got to check out the numbers over here and over there, and maybe it's different in this place. Well, now here we are 3 months later, after the 60-minute special that just aired, the reports from Glassdoor, like now there's really no more saying it's not like that or didn't happen. We're past that now. This is now where we are. It's a worker's world, and we're seeing the benefits of that, right?
Sure. And, look, these media outlets like CBS are going to be the last ones to realize such a thing and acknowledge such a thing, because their audience are not workers. Their audience are the management class, the ownership class, or senior citizens who have been out of the workforce for 15 years, right? And so they're of course going to be the last ones to catch on to the kind of thing that you caught on early on, which is why your experiment went viral.
Yeah, and I said from the start, give me access to a larger pool of numbers, and I'm sure that you'll see this. The people with those large pools of numbers, they weren't looking for this stuff. It didn't fit with the narrative they were trying to push. When it comes to my state in particular, our unemployment benefits, we had to end them early. It's June, we got to cut all these leeches off, right? Because we got to get them out there and back to work, because nobody wants to work. And that's what that whole thing was predicated on. And now here we are 6 months after all that, like that cutting off of the benefits didn't fill up the empty jobs. There weren't as many empty jobs as they were claiming there were. And I believe in December, unemployment was at an all-time low in recorded unemployment history, right? So obviously the no one wants to work rhetoric kind of just was proven to be false, just across the board.
Well, remember, unemployment figures don't include people who have dropped out of the workforce, who have just given up on getting a job. So it's not completely accurate. Also, even though wages have been going up, they haven't kept up with the level of inflation that we're getting. And finally, that inflation started to make a dent in consumer spending. Consumer spending actually dropped in December, which should be, holiday season and all that. But it actually pulled back, I think, 1.9% consumer spending, because finally it's getting to a point people just can't afford this kind of inflation indefinitely. And
finally, we're at a tipping point where something has to change. Like, we're in the middle of those changes.
Well, what I think, and actually, Crystal Ball did a monologue on this week. We're probably on the verge of the next, Wall Street collapse-driven recession, because Wall Street, not just in the pandemic, Wall Street has been running on Fed money since 2008, really. If you look at the Treasury's balance sheet, which was something she showed in the monologue, up through 2005, the Fed's balance sheet is pretty consistent. And then 2008, it just spikes. And then the pandemic, it just spikes again. And now with this inflation, the Fed is between a rock and a hard place. Look, they would love to just continue with an accommodative monetary policy forever and make all their rich friends richer. They would love to just keep that going. But now the inflation is out of control. So they're in a position where they have to start hitting the brakes. But the thing is, the whole house of cards is built on this accommodative policy. So they stop their bond purchases, and more to the point, they start raising interest rates. Michael Burry, who I respect, he's the Big Short guy. He was the guy who called the collapse of the housing bubble. He put out a statement on Twitter. He's actually changed his Twitter handle to Cassandra because nobody ever heeds his warnings. And he said, everybody says to me, why didn't you warn people last time? And I did warn people last time. So here's my warning publicly. The market is going to crash in 2022. Now, he's saying this is the mother of all asset bubbles. This is tulip mania times 10. What we have
it makes sense,
now.
yeah.
But the thing is, this doesn't just hurt the guys on Wall Street when that happens. You remember 2008. I remember it. I lost my theater in 2008. I didn't have any money in stocks. Stocks had nothing to do with me. And I could all of a sudden, overnight, my rentals dried up on my theater because everyone was scared shitless and out of work, and nobody was going to spend money on anything like that. And I had to pull out of my lease early. So, it's not just the Wall Street guys who are affected. It's going to be everybody. And
I drove through the Rust Belt in May of 2009 because I got into a film festival in Michigan. And man, that was an education. Driving through Western PA, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan at that time. The town that the festival was held in was a beautiful town. It was right on Lake Michigan, big town, not a major city, but, big town, probably 50, 60, 70,000 people. When I tell you the entire town was boarded up, except the movie theater, because movie theaters always stay in business because people go to the movies when times are tough. Hot dog stand across the street from the movie theater, pizzeria down the block, one bar in town, and the yacht club was actually open. So we got to have some of the after parties at the yacht club. That was it. The entire town was boarded up.
There will always be drinking where there is sailors. So rest assured,
drinking, movies, and boats, pizza. Right.
There's going to be bars.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's Key West. During 2008, I had just left Georgia to Fort Myers, Key West area. I'd been in Georgia doing college, and then the recession hit, right? That was the Obama stimuluses. We got the $300 and $600 checks when he first hit office. And it was for the low end of the income. A lot of people probably didn't even notice that happened because, I think the cutoff was like $50,000 a year. Anything below that, you got this like free Obama money. And, at the time they came, it was like, I had like 2 bills that were overdue. I was like, boom, paid those and just moved on with my life. It didn't change my life or anything, right? But then as that recession went on, I ended up moving to California, which, as everyone else was recovering, California was still like, no, we're still screwed. So I made some really poor choices in where to be during all that because I was broke throughout all that. This bubble that's coming up makes sense. And we've had this happen in history, right? In our country, these things have happened a bunch of times. And the last time that things were this bad that we pulled out of it was, and I talk about this sometimes, when we taxed the rich people back in the 50s, right? There were too many millionaires. We got to tax the millionaires. We taxed the millionaires. Then we built like everything that our country has for an infrastructure right now. And then instead of maintaining it, we let it all go to shit. You've got the Flint's water pipes and busted down, power lines everywhere. But we put this system in place, the highways, all of this with money that we took from overinflated corporate assets from cronyism rules, right? And then we're seeing the same thing happen over the past 40 years. And it's like you were saying that these guys are talking about. It's the asset bubble. If we just keep giving rich people money, they'll give it back to us. Like, sure, that's working out really well.
They just buy back their own stock if you give them those tax cuts. That's what happened.
They buy back the pieces that they gave to us at a cheaper rate than they gave them to us. So now our labor has been devalued twice.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's gotten to a cartoonish point. It's gotten to a point where if you were to make a don't look up type satire about this, if people didn't know any better, they'd say it was insane. I mean, you could if you just confiscated half of Elon Musk's net worth right now, just with half of his net worth, one person, you could finance tuition-free 2-year college for 15 years for the entire country.
Yeah.
Right? 50% wealth tax on one man, 15 years. Everyone in America who wants to go to a 2-year college could do so for free if you took half of Elon Musk's money, and he'd still be one of the richest men in the world
still
after
be a billionaire,
you took half of it. Right.
Still continue making his billions, right? Like, and that's the thing and it's so hard to talk to people about this kind of thing. Like, when we talk about wanting to do something like that, I don't want to take your money, Mr. Bob, that owns a construction business. Like, no. And them having you convinced that your money has anything to do with their money is why they've already won. Like, because if we took these tax breaks, and I think I see it because working with guys in this field a lot, construction, pizza joints, shit like this. The disconnect there is that when you're a small business owner and you open up your small business and like you're getting those tax breaks to like, get going where like everything, you can write all these off and you feel like you've really made it because like your first year, boom, I got to write off all my taxes. You feel like that's what those guys are doing, right? And so like, I don't want to take that from them. This is benefiting me. And it's like, that's not what they're doing, dude. That's the feeling that you and them are getting the same benefit from this tax process is built in order to have the middle class feel like they're the upper class. But we're really everyone that makes below $500,000 a year. We are all poor people compared to a drop of Musk's bucket.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you make that point in the past, and it's a good one. But I do think it should be added that, there is a management class, a small business owner class that has sort of been bought off by the system where, they are comfortable. They feel good in their situation. Are they a poor schmuck compared to Jeff Bezos? Sure, but they don't really care. That doesn't really bother them. Right. They have what they need. They're proud of what they built.
The toys.
Right. Yeah. I built the business. I'm proud. And these are the ones who are saying no one wants to work. If you notice, it's mostly these small business types who are saying this. And, that's why, because they're very proud of this business they built. I went and I built the business, and they're used to a desperate and immiserated permanent underclass of laborers who have to work for whatever crumbs they throw them. And
absolutely,
because of a number of things now, they're not doing that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. They're the same guys too, that'll like, while they're saying that, they'll hire an illegal because he's $4 an hour cheaper. They'll participate in these systems that perpetuate the problem. They'll scream, build this wall, and then they'll hire the guy that doesn't have papers because he's cheaper. And then,
that's why, and that's why they love Donald Trump.
They'll do the cash transaction and not report those on taxes. And it's like, okay, guy, but like those are all crimes. So that you rail against.
Well, that and this, I mean, a guy like Donald Trump makes perfect sense when you look at it that way, right? Because he's exactly the same way. Build the wall. He's hired undocumented workers before. He's exploited all of the loopholes that he has his
all finger on the pulse.
Has provided them. Right. Yeah, he's got his finger on the pulse of these people.
He knows good business.
Right.
I'm good at business. I'm business the hardest.
Right. Well, he'll say the system is unfair, and then he'll take advantage of the unfair system. And
Yeah.
people say, well, that's this huge inconsistency, right? All the liberals were, all putting on late night TV shows. Look, he rails against China, but he makes his ties in China. Well, that's the point, that all of these small business people would say and do the exact same thing. That's why they like him. That's why,
no one
it makes
to work,
perfect
but
sense.
I'm not going to pay them more than $10 an hour. So that's obviously their problem.
Well, we talked about, I mean, you recommended that I watch the 60 Minutes Big Quit segment. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about that segment is that there is a factor here that I think people are kind of missing. They talk about how employees are tired of their employers. And I think that's true. But they also touched in that segment that a lot of the resignation that's going on are in the food and business and in the hospitality business. And I think there's another factor that is contributing to this burnout, which is customers. I think employees are fed up with customers as well because of COVID. Right. And look, the rise of the Karens,
Well,
yes, exactly. I mean, the Karens are a huge problem. And I'm not against people going out to a bar or a restaurant. Look, I'm married. I have 2 kids. If those are the only 3 people I ever see again, I'd be happy with that. I understand single people get, you've been locked in a room for 2 years. You have to get out. You have to live your life. You need some human interaction. So it would be arrogant and selfish of me to lecture people about how dare you go out to a Chili's, whatever, and have a good time once in a while with a few friends, right? I would never say don't do that.
But if you're going to do it, have some respect for the people around you.
Well, exactly. Have some respect for the people around you. And also, like, someone in my situation, I haven't gone to Chili's. I haven't taken the wife and kids out to Applebee's since COVID happened. And I kind of think you probably shouldn't. But if you're in my spot, but if you're not in my spot, then go. But yeah, be cool. I drive my day job now is I drive for all the apps. I do the DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats. So I'm in these restaurants all the time, picking up food and leaving. And I was in an Applebee's 2 days ago. I go into the Applebee's. I'm waiting for them to box the order up. And there's this woman and her friend, dressed, like business suits and stuff like that. This woman is sitting there sipping a lemonade. The food's not there yet. And she's coughing and sneezing and wheezing all constantly for like 2 minutes straight. Finally, the waitress goes over to her and says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, listen, your food's not here yet, so I'm going to have to ask you to put a mask on if you keep coughing like that, just to be safe for our sake and the rest of the customers." Now, she was cool. She listened. She said, "Okay, fine. I get it." Right? There are a lot of people who wouldn't be that cool about it. A lot of people give you a fucking attitude about it, and then they tip you 10%.
It's so easy to just do it. Like, I've lost zero freedom by having a vaccine. I've lost zero freedom by just throwing a mask on when someone asks me to. The people I see losing their freedoms over this shit are the ones dying outside of the hospital because they couldn't get in. The ones, that can't get into the place they want to go because they refuse to follow the rules, or kicked off of their flight because they're punching a flight attendant over a mask. It's like, guys, you're self-imposing these losses of freedom. It's like punching yourself in the face and be like, "Oh my God, I have a black eye." Like, shut up.
Well, I mean, in terms of the employees, though, I think dealing with these people is not worth it anymore. No. And this dynamic has always existed to an extent in restaurant business, tourism. Russell and I both work in
but
that
we put up with
here
it
in New York.
Because the money is okay. We used to.
Right, but it is very much a serfs waiting on the rich dynamic. Like in New York City, the Uber drivers are all hustling out a very meager living. The cab drivers, right? The restaurant workers, the busboys, we're all schlepping around these rich people who fly in and stay at the Plaza Hotel for a week. And we're all just hustling to make their lives very comfortable and very easy. And, we're willing to do it because whatever, it pays, it's a gig. Fine. But under these circumstances now, when the very act of getting on an airplane and flying to New York and putting your family up in a hotel and gallivanting around New York City as if there's not a pandemic going on,
right,
is kind of irritating in the first place. Add to that, you start being a pain in the ass and not tipping and being demanding. People are just like, you know what? Fuck this. I've had it with this. I'm not doing this anymore,
Well, Key West, tourist town, like we're 8 square mile island, right? And that's where I was when the pandemic hit. And when everything started going the way it did, we were a ghost town. We had the road blocked off. So you couldn't get into or out of the Florida Keys until June 1st. And then that first weekend that they opened up that year, it was 2020, Miami shut right back down. Like the mayor was like, oh, you guys are getting too crazy, shut it down. So everyone got in their cars and drove south. And that was the first taste of what we thought at the time was just this insanity. We were like, how can people be so rude? We've been like plastic sheets and everything. Like we've been full lockdown procedures, all this stuff. And this is, the rest of Florida was kind of no man's land. And then a couple of cities were like still trying to maintain order. And at this point, like all of our mayors have stopped trying stuff like that, because every time they do something, the government, yeah, whatever, we're doing what we want anyways, and took away their agency to enforce the things. And so at this point, everyone just gave up. It's like my best chance is I just wear my mask and be jabbed and hope that the unvaxxed don't kill me. But back then it seemed like a weird thing that people would act like this. It was like, at the end of the day, it'd be like, oh, I can't believe that person started screaming at you over this mask thing. And now it's just like, that's a part of everyday life in this industry. And the people who are still in it are champions for sticking it out and putting up with this every day. But like, I don't want to do it. I can't do it. And I couldn't. My bullshit tolerance level has gone down so little. Like I could not work and put up with these people. And when you think about the jobs that aren't paying enough, right? Like the McDonald's and stuff that are for the high school kids, who's going to subject their children to this? I will tell my kid to stay home before I let them go work at a McDonald's, where someone's going to throw their like their hot coffee in the soup. The lady got the soup thrown at her face. Like these people are animals.
Well, funny just hearing someone from Florida talk like this, because New York, we have pains in the ass, but we don't like throw food. You don't really hear like throwing punches and throwing, chicken nuggets at people's faces. You guys are short tempered down there. We have the reputation of being hot-headed.
It's the sun, it's the heat. The heat gets to you.
Well, that's actually that there's science. People are more violent in the heat.
Yes, of course. Crime always goes up in the summertime. Yeah.
Every time there's a heat wave in New York, right? That shit goes wild.
Yeah.
Well, plus you guys aren't used to it, so like at least us, we've been dealing with this hatred our whole lives.
Well, to me, the big question now with all of this workers empowerment is now they cut off the child tax credit. So what's that going to do? What's that going to do to the unemployment picture? And also, if consumer spending was already trending down because of inflation, what's that going to do to consumer spending? I mean, Keaton, you were a recipient, so.
Yeah, I mean, we have been getting the $600 payment hitting the account on the 15th. We're doing this recording on the morning of the 15th. That's not there now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, of course. I mean, it's but look, they're slowly trying to tweak the dials to reset the dynamic back to what it was, because this is very disruptive, and it's disruptive in ways that I think are fantastic. Like I think the Great Resignation is a fantastic, very inspiring thing to see. But on the flip side, it does make life harder for everybody, including me. I mean, like I said, I make a living going to, driving, DoorDash, Uber Eats and everything. I don't get paid by the hour. I get paid by the job. So the more jobs I can do in a 7-hour period, well, it's not so much that people aren't buying it. It's that the restaurants are understaffed and it is taking longer to fill each order. So if I do, 25 orders in a, 6-hour shift, I'll make X amount of dollars. But, I'd rather do 30 orders in a, that same block of time and make a lot more. And the fact that these places are short staffed does make it harder, and shelves aren't stocked the way they used to be. I do Instacart as well. So I got to go shopping. When an item is not there, it's a pain in the ass. It slows you down. You got to text hey, do you want this flavor bullshit instead of the flavor you put on the thing, right? And they say, yeah, if they have this, look at the, it slows you down. It's easier when everything is there. You scan the barcode, boom, you go. Yeah. So it does slow things down.
We've gotten used to a lot of these conveniences that we have now that we really didn't have all the, like the fact that Oh, what was the post I saw the other day? It's like people think that like someone from the 17th century would be like astounded by our cell phones. It's like, nah, dude, he's gonna see that rack with spices from around the world and be like, you got all those in one spot?
Right, right.
Serious?
Exactly.
Like, look,
Yeah.
yeah, I made this post the other day. We didn't have your keto mushroom foie gras burgers at every CVS 10 years ago. Like, we have
Right.
sort of gotten used to everything being right where we want it when we want it. And growing up as a poor kid, it was like that wasn't always the case. Like there were things that weren't available for you on the shelf. There was, if they didn't have the type of cheese that mom could get with the Wix, you don't get the cheese. Like that's it. They're the
Sure
period.
thing. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
But I'm just
so
saying, it's not just that.
it's another
like,
it's
sorry,
another
go
thing where people who never had to experience this type of thing that around the world is day-to-day life. Now all of a sudden it is reaching people who are used to, hunting at the Publix meat aisle. Like,
ahead. Sure thing. Yeah, exactly. But that doesn't just affect like people and their like immediate wants or their immediate cravings, right?
right. Because
That
it also
actually
goes
like,
as far to like things you need. Like,
well, that and also like the economy does run based on a model of convenience and instant gratification. Like, I don't want the keto hamburger at CVS, but if I have a DoorDash order and I'm supposed to pick this up and have it to the person's house in 15 minutes so I could check it off and get the next order and maximize my dollarly earnings in an hour,
right.
it's a pain in the fucking ass when it's not there. Because
Yep.
when it's not there, then I got to call the customer. Hey, they don't have this. Would you like something else? It slows you down. And now I make less money as a worker. I don't even want the hamburger. The burger's not the issue
Right.
for me. I just want it so I can get it to the customer so I can keep moving. And now things do not move as fast. I mean, I made the mistake yesterday of calling my wife and telling her I was on my way home after I got done working. You know where this is going.
That always
can
works
you
out.
stop and get this on the okay, so 20 minutes later, I'm hyperventilating at a fucking Dunkin' Donuts waiting for a latte. 15 minutes you're there, standing there. The drive-through line is wrapped around the building. There's one person ahead of me in line. There's only 3 people working this place, who are doing the best they can. It's not their fault.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I'm inspired by the fact that there's only 3 people working here because fuck Dunkin' Donuts, right? On the other hand, I'm about to have a fucking heart attack because I've been standing here for 15 minutes. I'm sweating. I've been working all day. I want to get home, and the coffee's not coming. And so there are 2 sides to this, and it's not just a matter of comfort. It's a matter.
Then we got to remember the thing behind that too is that the manager that's running that has a stack of qualified applicants that he can hire on the spot to fix this problem. But Dunkin' Donuts won't give him what he needs to offer them what they need to come in and work.
Well, right,
so,
exactly.
So hopefully, what we'll see when this crash is happening, when I was talking to my boss in the Keys, we get because he's on the other side of this, and I was explaining to him, I'm like, he's like, well, if people don't like this stuff, they should just quit. And I'm like, that's what they did. That's what they all did. He's like, well, good. And I'm like. But then in the same next breath, he was talking about like he couldn't find his cream cheese. I'm like, well, that those people that quit, some of them drove trucks,
right? Exactly.
Like,
right.
And if we just and I mean, we're not asking to like make everyone rich, but damn, if we can't at least make sure that they can pay the fucking rent. Like, there's so many places we can improve these things. And there are people out there working on finding ways to improve it on a daily basis. Like we have, my experiment, I've had people that I've been talking about the changes that we're seeing. There are better offers coming out and there are better jobs happening. And there's a lot of people that aren't going to come back to the workplace. So there's no amount of offers or changes or benefits are going to happen to bring a lot of these people back. And they touched on this in the 60 Minutes episode. A big number of the people that quit were the boomers, the retiring, right. They were going to work for another 5 or 6 years. And then they're like, but I don't have to. So they're not gonna, they're just gone. And a lot of those people are the ones that were working at McDonald's for fun or greeting at Walmart for fun too. Like, they didn't do it because they needed the money. If they needed the money, they wouldn't have chose Walmart greeter. They did it to get out of the house and talk to people. And now there's no reason to want to get out of the house and talk to people, because when you do, they're out there acting a damn fool.
Yep. Yeah, I really wonder though if this is going to be sustainable. I mean, people got to eat. In the
It's
end,
not going to be
people
sustainable.
people need to
Something's going to
pay their
change.
bills. Well, that's what I'm saying. It just seems like as a country, we're very close to the edge.
Yeah.
It's just I don't see with where we're at how this country weathers another economic collapse like we saw in 2008. I just don't see how we come out the other side of that without just imploding as a country, without just massive political violence and rioting and just
Yeah, I really
crazy.
wish we could go
Like
through the political upheaval without all of that, but like that doesn't happen. No country's ever failed and then just silently transitioned into a good spot to be.
Well, also, don't
the
forget,
The British
2008, as
kind of
bad as that was, there were factors that mitigated the harm there. Part of it was that the market crashed 6 weeks before a presidential election in which the country voted overwhelmingly for a candidate who they thought stood for the opposite values that the current administration had stood for. They thought Barack Obama was going to get things on track again.
I really thought he was going to
him
pull us out of the war and make us some more money, and he didn't really do either. But he gave the illusion of both for a minute.
But that held the country together in a big way because we thought, okay, help is on the way at least. Something like that happens now, a year and a half into Joe fucking pants shitting Biden's administration, where he's still got 2 years to go, and then God knows what, maybe Trump comes back. Forget about it. It's just going to explode. There's no hope on the horizon now.
That's what I'm saying. Like like if Michael Burry is right and you get a crash this year and it has the broad impact on working people that the last one did, I just don't see how we hold together as a country. I mean, except in a very rough sense. It's just the wheels are just going to come off.
I mean, it's we're gonna have to do what I've been talking about this whole time. We have to focus on the people around us first. Like when I talk about, and I'm in touch with people from unions and stuff. Florida is not a union state, but the connections that have happened, that have come from all of the experiment and the people it's put me in contact with, and the people that have reached out to me for all the various reasons, like I've got a group of people, we're working together to put like sort of create some workers protections in a place where we don't have any, like, and not relying on the government to do it for the same reason we don't need to rely on the government to raise the minimum wage, because the corporations that are paying for these jobs to be done can absolutely raise any wage to a living wage to pay an employee to keep operating. Like these are things they are capable of doing without government interference. All of the people that say they don't want the government involved with their life, but then like they want to go by the government's rules and how they run shit. The government's telling you what the minimum is to pay. They're not giving you a maximum. You want someone in a job, pay someone to do that job, they'll come do it. And the places that do that are seeing that. So it's on us as the people in this country to continue, whether or not the country is operating effectively. If I make sure that I'm surrounded by people that if the government stopped operating, well, in a lot of ways, it doesn't operate in a way that I see works for me anymore. I mean, this is why I'm pretty much an anarchist. Like I want to believe in the pragmatic anarchy thing. Like I want to believe that this country we live in is great and that we can do these great things because that's what I was raised on. But in practice, I haven't seen it, right? And none of us have seen it. Like we've seen everyone argue and flip. And I watched was the 2000 presidential election, the first one I followed, and it's like, just kidding. What happened wasn't really what happened because of these over here, and we're gonna go check this box in this back room, and the rules change on a daily basis depending on who's paying the paychecks over there. But between me and my friends and the food that I have stored and the boat that he's got over there, and this, like, we don't need the government to exist in our circle. Right. A lot of our country needs that. And we need to get back. If our food, if we were buying more local food, we wouldn't have as much shit that doesn't show up on the train from Philly with the cream cheese and things like this. Like it shouldn't be on people to personally take responsibility for the problems that corporations have created in this world. Like, you know, the convincing us we're the problem when the environment's being raped by the companies and all these things that they've done, all this marketing they've done to convince people that they are the problem when in fact we are the solution. The only way to combat all of those things is to say what you guys are doing and what you guys are saying is fucking bullshit. And us over here at Camp Joe on the corner of the cul-de-sac, like, we're not dealing with that anymore. I mean, that's what America started on.
Well,
they said, screw you and your out of touch government, we're out. Unfortunately, we don't have anywhere to run, so we have to stand here, you know?
Well, a little weird digression here. In my pandemic reading, I read a book called Civilized to Death that essentially made the argument that everything that people point to as justification for civilization is actually something that was developed to try to address problems that were created by civilization, like modern medicine, dentistry, things like that. Until people start eating grain, they die with perfect teeth. We need dentists because of what civilization has done to our diet. So
that makes sense.
So in any case, one of the most interesting things he talked about was we have this impression of tribal societies that they're very hierarchical, and that basically our way of doing things with kings and presidents is kind of a projection of that tribal tendency to have an hierarchical command structure. And actually, he pointed out that studies show that that's not true. In fact, in many cases, if somebody in the tribe starts bragging, like shows themselves to kind of be a braggart or somebody who wants to take over or tell people what to do, first they'll kind of try to use subtle means of getting that person back on an egalitarian track. And if they persist, a lot of times they'll kill the motherfucker as a danger to the tribe. So essentially, what we have is all those guys run our tribe.
Yeah.
Those people who in a real tribal circumstances would have been killed because they would have been recognized as a danger to peace, harmony, and egalitarianism, they're running the show. They're running the whole society. Now, if you look at people on a person by person, individual basis, look, we lived in these tribal circumstances for a lot longer than we've lived in civilization. The idea that when you get a disaster, everyone's going to go all Lord of the Flies. Study after study shows it's quite the opposite. People fall back on their genetic inheritance, which is basically to be cooperative and egalitarian.
Oh, I saw it right here in Lehigh Acres after Hurricane Irma, right? Hurricane Irma hit Key West and Fort Myers. Like, it did this weird loop and hit the place where my house and my boat were. I really pissed someone off that year in the hurricane section. But afterwards, we had no power, everything, the town's flooded, all this stuff's going on. And there's no internet. So, the family takes the big smoker, puts it up on the corner. All the ribs in our restaurant were about to go bad, so they cook them and give them out. Everyone comes together. They help each other. You see a guy standing there like struggling with a tree. You stop, help him drag it off. Like, everyone came together and worked together for a couple of weeks. And then the minute the internet went back up,
right,
everyone stopped helping. Like, boom, now we can all go back to living our regular lives. The minute that those comforts weren't available, everyone looked around and said, oh, wow, like, hey, neighbor, you need some help? Oh, hey, you hungry? I got you. This food's going to go bad. Sharing and people, I think it was what, Tommy Lee Jones, like Men in Black or something. People, a person is good, but people are dangerous creatures, right? You start to put a group of them together to, all of our technological advances before like the last 100 years where it got all crazy, but going back into the tribal systems, I've read a lot about this stuff too. And it's shown that like progress happens when it comes to like humanitarian, like all the things that we think of as societal values, like taking care of the people around you and things like this. Like, they would progress better and they all of our examples show you get better results from that in smaller groups. You have a group of 5 to 10 people. Does a much better job at taking care of each other than a group of 1,000 people. The group of 1,000 people, you end up with 20 or 30 people that are just screwed out of the deal because of politics or whatever. And then, we're that inflated to, 500 million and 200 years of bullshit rules.
Well, it's hard to project tribal values onto people you're never going to meet.
Right.
right? I mean, really, we evolved in bands of about 60 group members, all of whom
Yeah. Well, if you look at the
we
government
knew
of the
very
United
well.
States before the United States existed, if you look at the tribal nations and the way
Mhm.
that network worked, like it was the truest example of small localized government on a large
Mhm.
scale,
Right.
because
Right.
every tribe was its own thing and they just all worked cooperatively in the ways which they needed to, and in the ways which they did not, they just stayed the fuck out of each other's way.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, communism in a lot of ways was an attempt to try to figure out how to have these tribal values within an impersonal, massive state. And clearly it didn't go very well, at least in the Soviet Union. And I think that is partly the problem of the impersonal nature of mass societies. It's hard to tell people to be invested in people that just they're an abstraction. How do you wrap your head around 60 million people, 100 million people,
Well,
300
and yeah, in
million
our
people?
country, is so big, and we have these things that are about to happen, another crash, and the political divides that we've had, and we really are almost like, at this point, it almost would be better. I'd split America into like a couple of sections, you know what I mean? Like maybe we got the middle, you know, but then that's going to be a whole different thing. We couldn't split it up. Even if we split it up into 50 separate states, there's just going to be more issues that creates than solutions.
I think we have a broad problem with a corrupt ruling class that needs to be removed from power.
Yeah,
but
that's
know,
not going to
as
happen without pitchforks.
who is it, Hannah Arendt, who said never think the powerful will allow you to vote them out of power.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Well,
yeah,
January 6th last year, we saw it almost happen, right? Like,
yes. Well, and this is a big part of why they've tried to drum up so much focus on that rather than to examine the causes of it, because yeah, that's terrifying to them. It exposes how rickety the system is, especially because the cops very often drawn from the same class as the rioters.
right.
So
And that's and you know, one of my hot takes that people didn't really particularly like from me last year, but I wasn't mad that the Capitol was being stormed. I was not mad that people were trying to take the power back from a corrupt government. I was mad that the people that were trying to take that, I was mad for the reason, because that is just, that's not how that works. Like, I'm really glad that there's,
well, yeah, to keep that
people
piece of
that are
shit
mad
in
enough
power.
that they want to take the power back, but it was the wrong people, and it was for the wrong reasons.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but what does it say about
if they stormed the Capitol demanding that you know, a wealth tax, and
Yeah.
that members of Congress can no longer trade in the stock market?
Yeah, give us the benefits you guys
yeah, but
get.
the people
if that had been the motivation, we would have gotten kicked off Facebook a long time ago, because we would have been like, "Viva la revolution!"
Well, sure,
Exactly.
but the people who want a wealth tax don't have the balls to do that.
Right.
You know, the people who wanted a second Trump term are the ones who had the balls to do that, and that's why they did it, and that's why people
because
like
it's
us
built
just
into
podcast.
those of us who want
Because we don't have the balls to do it
for people, know that what's best for people isn't to go punch them in the face and tell them to do what we want. You know what I mean? Like, that's a problem with being the more civilized half of the argument. It feels like it's like, my ability to overcome the desire to punch you in the face is the reason that I feel the way that I feel. Your inability to overcome that is why you're in this "let's go take it" mode.
Well, we have to be careful here. We're going to get to dangerous territory. But listen,
Yeah.
Hey, it's not my show. We're guests on this one.
Hey, I'm
this
the pragmatic anarchist. If we can't pragmatically talk about anarchy, then why are we here?
There's the left wasn't always that way. This is, well, I'm not big on conspiracy theories, but
we got to draw the line in the right place, and it is a financial line, and it is not left or right. It is up and down.
Right. Exactly. I have I've long been fascinated by 60s and 70s thinking and revolutionary movements. And, it wasn't until I read a book that was not directly about guerrilla actions in that period. It was called Nixon Land. And it was a book that wanted to examine the Nixon years from the angle of what was happening in the country rather than an insider view of what was happening in the Nixon White House.
Oh, okay.
And
So, yeah.
and it was in that book that I discovered that we used to have, in the early 70s, we used to have 2,000 domestic bombings a fucking year. A year. Like, I had never come across that information, not in any
2,000 a year, that's
time
a lot.
life retrospective on the
That's
60s
way
or
more than
70s.
the school shootings now. So yeah, that's a number they didn't ever throw
No,
out
they
there.
would bomb all the time, and these were not right-wing domestic groups. These were left guerrilla groups. The most famous, of course, was the Weather Underground. But so at one time, it was actually the left that was doing those things. It was actually the left that would go bomb a government building.
Well, hey, lately everyone's had the internet to blow off our steam and kind of get us through the pandemic and while everyone was home, but if this collapse thing is coming and people are pissed and the ability to keep ourselves distracted starts losing its grasp, well, maybe we'll see a rise in that again. I would hope that our country can find a way out of this hole without violence. And anytime we've seen someone try to do that, someone shows up and starts tear gassing them and punching them, and then
look,
you
could definitely argue that things like that empowered Nixon and later on empowered Reagan.
Yeah,
you could definitely argue that
if you have an enemy,
that was a counter reaction to people feeling the country's gone crazy and they're running around and bombing post offices. We need to elect a strong man.
Well, the question is, how effectively can the ruling class and the sort of bought off, managerial class that I talked about earlier, how effectively can they insulate themselves from the consequences of this? Because if they start feeling it, there's going to be demand to do something about it, and that demand will come through the political system. If they don't feel it, and they can just go on TV and talk about January 6th as if it's this total anomaly, as opposed to what it was. In 1997, sure, that would have been a crazy thing.
But this was literally after a year of riots. So
right.
It wasn't.
And so if they are still able to put that narrative out there, then the political system is not going to respond to the crisis because they own the political system. And so the only way that there is going to be a peaceful solution is if everybody, and by everybody, I mean, look, Jeff Bezos is never going to feel it, right? But if the pizza shop owners, right, and the guy who owns a chain of gas stations, if that precarious upper middle class section of bosses and owners and managers, people with not mansions but nice homes, when they start feeling the crunch, that's when political change can actually happen in a nonviolent way. But if they just wall themselves up, as they've been able to do since 2008, frankly, and just let everybody else,
they just got richer,
suffer and scrounge. They've been doing.
They got
well
richer in 2008. They got richer in the pandemic.
In 2010,
if they don't feel it, then there's not going to be a peaceful solution because the political system which they own is not going to respond. Fair. It doesn't respond to democratic input now. It's not going to respond to democratic input as long as those people remain comfortable.
But we are now at least at a point. We are now at least at a point where the aging out of people from that, the further down that line we get, now I'm almost old enough to be eligible to be president. I'm not, but I mean, you've seen James Gunn's tweets, the stuff that I posted online. I'm never going to be in that type of politics for sure. Disney will never hire me, but the political climate that we're in and these changes that are going to come and these people that are going to see these effects, those are going to be us now. Even though it can't be me, the people who are more in line with, and I feel like they are, there's things that won't be an issue anymore, like eventually. Our generation, you know, when it comes to trans rights and racism and stuff, like we are really, really, really ahead of it. Like we don't want to be participating in those stupid systems anymore. Can we please get over it? You know, in a generation or two, like hopefully those aren't issues. But the way our country works in reality, just like racism is not supposed to be an issue anymore, it's still baked into the system that is ran in a lot of ways. There's no easy way to make our system, when it comes to this, we can't fix it to not be biased against poor people. Like it's always going to screw us as poor people. As long as banks can charge an empty bank account $35 per transaction, that bank is built to keep rich people rich, you know?
Sure. And that's why poor people are never on the sort of vanguard of the you know, like fixing
because we
problems
can't afford to be in politics.
Well, but also that's why they're never centered in any sort of cultural movement. I mean, you talked about trans rights now is a big push among, you know, comfortable liberal leftists, right? Well, 10 years ago, it was gay marriage.
To transition, though, like even that, like the privilege to transition is monetarily based in a way.
Yeah. Trust me,
big way.
You ain't kidding. All right.
One of my
you
friends,
ever see
I
a
watched
rich
her go
trans
through
person versus a poor trans person? The rich trans people are gorgeous. The poor trans people, ooh.
My poor trans friends are gorgeous too, but I had to sit there with them through the struggle, and goddamn, was it
I mean,
hard.
I don't mean like spiritual. I mean, like
yeah, but like you just afford all the extra bells and whistles,
right? Exactly. And you know, like what I would say is like, you know, the trans rights push now is just 8 years divorced from, or 8 years after the gay marriage push. In other words, there's always going to be a new cultural push, right?
Yes.
That
something to take the focus off where
liberals and
where
leftists can all feel good about themselves without costing the ruling class any money or any power, right? There's always going to be something like that. I don't know what it's going to be in 10 years. 10 years, you know, forget it. I won't make that joke. But anyway, there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something. I'd make it on my show. We'll make it on yours. But there's always going to be something there. But you're never going to have until the people with money are affected by whatever cataclysmic.
Yeah, the last 10 years didn't affect Bezos or Musk or anyone bad. They went from 2 billion to 200 billion. So like it's working for them really well. Why would they want it to stay exactly how it is? And the pandemic made it even better, right? Like Amazon has greatly benefited from the pandemic. Everybody,
of course,
Florida, all of Florida's like bullshit that they were talking, like all of the foreseen losses we were going to take through the pandemic. 9 out of 11 industries showed growth last year. So like the big bad economic things were going to happen here because of the bailout money and our governor's refusal to enact any sort of precautions once he told you fuck it Wild West. Like we're in a bubble in Florida that I don't think is happening other places, but it is. And this is where, and we're going to wrap it up here. We're getting about to the end, but I do want to leave off with this because it is one of the things I'm trying to push. Like Florida is perfectly poised to unionize. If we look at the times and places where unionization has happened, the railroads, you know, we have the power. We're building the fucking railroads. Like you have to listen to us or the railroad doesn't get made. This is where everybody's coming. All of that food and beverage industry, every single person in Florida that like goes to work every day right now, like, and puts up with these people because it's everywhere that should, it's everyone comes to Florida to be an asshole right now. It's like, and the pandemic's made it worse. And they're like, the anti-masking and the anti-vaxxing. And it's just also like, I have lost zero freedom from being vaxxed, but these workers that are doing it, like, and everyone I talk to, like, this is where we can organize. Like New York, same thing. Like New York organized its unions when everything was getting built because that's where the money was being spent. And the money wasn't going to be made without the people making it for them. So right now, the workers of Florida are literally poised. We are what runs the state that Governor DeSantis is so lovingly keeping open for everyone to come hang out in. Like, but him saying, keep the doors open, it's not going to work if we're not at work because they're not paying us more than $10 an hour. So I'm hoping that some worker protections at least come from all this. I'm hoping that at the very least, like union membership's been what is it, less than 10%. And that's like an all-time low since unions started being a thing. I don't know if I don't even know if unions are the word, maybe a new form of a union or something, but a way to protect people from this shit, because the government's not going to do it, right? The government's not going to protect us from anything. The government's going to protect their pockets and their interests, period. The only people who are going to protect us is us.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is one of the other big questions is, and at like what Russell talked about earlier, like how much longer can this go on? Because yes, you like to see workers holding out. You love to see that. You love to see
I'd rather
them
see them go to
demanding
work and be
more.
able to pay their bills, right?
Right. But at the end of the day, right, people do need to eat, and there has to be some government response in order to make that happen. So like we talk about, there's a big debate going on right now in New York and all over the country about whether we should be sending kids to school to learn in school, or whether they should learn remotely at home. And, look, a big question is, if they stay home, are parents going to be able to stay home and watch them? And if they can't stay home and watch them without losing a ton of money every month and not being able to pay the rent and the mortgage,
my mom
can
couldn't
you
pay the
actually
rent with
have
me
at
in
home
school,
learning?
Right.
And so there has to be some organized government response to that. If you gave everybody $2,000 a month, as Kamala Liar Harris was on record supporting when the Democrats had no power, now that she's vice president, she hasn't said a peep about that. Right. But as a senator and would-be VP, let's give everybody $2,000. If everybody had the means to stay home if they needed to, work from home if they needed to, then you could have kids stay home and learn from home if they needed to. Why can't you just have schools open and have every teacher just Zoom what they're doing? So you can have, if some kids need the social interaction of being in school and the parents have to work, those kids can come in, and the kids who could stay home can stay home, but everybody gets $2,000 a month, so that it's not a deal breaker for anybody.
If your parents have a weird schedule, if your parents are working this day, then you're in school. And if they're not, okay, school at home today, teachers on the Zoom. Like that makes good sense. Why not have both
a UBI
options?
Because you don't want a situation where the rich kids get to stay home and be safe, and the poor kids, whose parents have to work, 8-hour shift at the gas station, have to go in and get COVID. So give everybody some money, which was a mainstream idea in Democratic politics up until they had the ability to actually do it. And maybe open
I say full UBI, but nobody's on board with the UBI thing.
Well, that's what I was talking about, the UBI. Yeah,
like
the UBI is a no-brainer. Of course.
Why not? The only thing I would add to that is, as for lack of somebody with more qualifications as the resident economist at Dissidence, 40% of the money supply existing in the world has been printed over the last year and a half. Wow. So we are testing modern monetary theory in a way that it's never been tested before. So I personally, and hey, I'm a leftist, man, I would love to be able to say that I believe you could just keep printing money and that's how you take care of everything.
We know that doesn't work.
History would suggest that it does not. I mean, one of the first empires to discover this was actually the Mongolian Empire. It was a big part of why it didn't last very long, because they started just printing money.
Yeah, you can't just rapidly
their
expand
military expansion. Right. And, Weimar Germany and so on. So my preference for how policies like that would be enacted is, look, we want to half-ass everything, and we don't want to cause any pain to the wealthy. Rather than to print more currency, I would argue we should be taking currency.
Well, of course. Obviously. Obviously.
Well, but the tendency, I think, on the left is to go towards modern monetary theory these days, because we know they're just not going to take money away from the rich. That as soon as we make taking money from the rich a part of the conversation, that's it.
Right.
That's it.
And it's like, but because they think we're talking about them, and it's like, we're not
for that.
Yeah, we're not talking about you, Mr. Joe Smith, that owns a little construction company. We're talking about, like, you could take, let's say, the top 2% of wealth earnings, right? Just cut that off the top, and then just redistribute that at the bottom 2%. That would create a huge fix. Like they say, how many people that help? It help a lot more people than it does not doing it.
Wall Street transaction taxes. I mean, you book a hotel room, look at how much tax is on that.
Right.
You know, oh, the hotel's $150 a night. By the time the taxes are added, it's $210. You know,
Right.
have a
Don't
Wall Street
forget the
transaction
resort
tax. There's all
fees.
kinds of things you can do. So yeah, I mean, I don't know of any.
Which is also going to tamp down speculation. Like at this point, to me, the greatest symbol that we're maybe coming to the end of a speculative madness is the metaverse. The way people are bidding up non-existent virtual real estate in the metaverse. I mean, how much more decadent can you get? You have homeless veterans all over the country.
If I could move
and
into the
people
metaverse, I
are
would.
paying money for them.
I would just move right into the internet.
Apparently, a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, just jack me into the Matrix. I don't even want to remember that. Like the not Matrix is a thing. Just I want to be the guy in the first Matrix. It's like
Joey Pantoliano with the steak saying, "I don't want to
make me forget and make me rich. I'm good."
Yeah.
And that's the problem is a lot of people that go through the struggle, like they get to the point in their life where like maybe like, you know, the struggle is no longer as bad, and then so you forget where it was. And then all of a sudden you get the success and you forget that like in your 20s, you would have punched the guy you are today in the face. Like, I think about that sometimes. I'm like, if I told me I was living in this house, my name, I wouldn't believe me. I'd be like, there's no way I just like relaxed and hung out with my dog for a year and didn't go out on crazy adventures. Like, but yeah, that's, you know, it would have been irresponsible for me to go out and do the type of shit I used to do. You can't anymore. I can't go sailing from island to island all willy-nilly with nothing but a passport and a whim because there's a pandemic now. It's
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you know, it's funny because and I know we have to wrap soon, but like a lot of people I think are coming to an almost opposite realization. Like, I spent my 20s hustling and working all day, every day, as hard as I could, trying to save something up, trying to get enough money to buy a house, because, you know, I was really just working all the fucking time. And then when the pandemic hit and I couldn't work anymore, it led to a period of reflection that I think a lot of other people have had, which is I've been busting my ass this whole fucking time. And what has it gotten me? Nothing. And even if it did get me something, look at how quickly that something could have been taken away by a tiny little virus, you know? And so what's the
invisible
point
monsters
anymore?
ruin our world.
And that's why, and that's one of the driving forces behind the Great Resignation and the big quit, right? And the no one wants to work thing. Yeah.
And we will wrap here. We've been running a little long, but it's been really nice to talk to you guys. Like when I first came on your podcast and you said I was the most famous person been on there, I didn't realize that I was really that famous yet. Like now that it's all died down and stuff, it's, you know, it's been an interesting journey, but it went from something where, you know, a conversation, an action taken out of spite, and then a bunch of connections has now turned into, you know, now I'm part of a community that is a group of people trying to work towards like making our little section of this universe better. Like the No One Wants to Work group has been, you know, watching on a daily basis, like people like lifting each other up and helping us through this thing. Cause at the end of the day, we're the only people that are going to look out for us. And it's been really great to have you guys as people to talk to through all this. You guys have been very informative and very helpful in the process. So thanks for being on with me today and talking with me.
Thank you, man. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
And I guess I'll do my thing. I'll let you guys plug the Do Dissidence. I'll plug my stuff real quick. Obviously, thank you to all my Patreon subscribers. Anyone who would like to join the Patreon, it's www.patreon.com/MohawkJoey. And that covers all my stuff. The GoFundMe and everything's still on the Facebook, Mohawk Joey. Do Dissidence podcast can be found anywhere podcasts are. You guys are on Facebook as well, correct?
That's right.
Yes.
Yes.
And
we got a YouTube channel too.
And YouTube channel is also called Do Dissidence. Thank you guys for joining us here on the Pragmatic Anarchist, and have a wonderful day.
I got the jam and make you go to work. I got that jam and make you go.